Manchester City versus Real Madrid. That was a very interesting one. We're going to be breaking down the tactics that Pep used in this game, which I actually think worked really well. But then we're going to move into why it maybe sort of faded in that second half, the issues that cropped up, which are going to crop up against teams like Real Madrid. We're going to talk about that and a few of the issues essentially that Man City are having this season. So as you can see on screen, we've basically got the way that Man City set up. We're gonna start in this 4-3-3, but I'm gonna move the pieces around to show you what Pep sort of looked to do on the ball in possession, especially in that first half, to really, really good effect. For Real Madrid, though, just to really quickly point out, they were pressing with more of a front two, Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. You then had Bellingham playing in more of that left mid position in terms of off the ball. Rodrigo on the right, two in the pivot again. And then you had that makeshift back four of Valverde at right back, Tchouaméni and Asensio as the centre backs, and Mendy at left back. They have got no Rudiger, they had no Carvajal, they had no Alaba. Apparently, it's looking like Alaba and Rudiger are going to be back for the second leg. So that'll be interesting because Haaland did get some joy in terms of there was a certain pattern that City were looking to utilise quite a lot to find Haaland sort of 1v1 against one of these two centre backs, which again, it did work to good effect. So let's talk about what did work for City. So what Pep did in this game differently is he essentially inverted both of these players. Okay, really narrow alongside Stones, who is again playing in a different role, playing as that number six, not coming forward from a centre back into the number six, but actually starting as that number six, that lone pivot. And what we saw was these two splitting quite wide, really, and then Akanji and Vardiol coming inside here. KDB and Silva would push into these pockets, essentially being occupied by these players, with that front line of five. And then what you essentially had here was City with a three in the middle, two across the back. Again, sometimes they'd be a little bit tighter in, sometimes they'd spread completely, and Stones would drop into here, and it would sort of be feeding between those lines, as you can see here. Stones sort of the middle point of everything. What I really liked about this was the way that Pep used it to get the overloads, because with Vardiol and Akanji in here, you kept seeing them check their shoulder. They were clearly looking to pin Bellingham and Rodrigo inside with them. They were looking to make these little things happen here, which would then give City in this area that 3v2, because you've got Stones, Diaz, and Ake versus Mbappe and Vinny, who are trying to press in that front two. So I think that worked really well. What then was happening is where Akanji and Vardiol were coming narrow as well. They were literally coming really close into these midfield areas here and dragging someone like Rodrigo, let me get rid of these lines, into here. So let's say Vardiol comes inside, Rodrigo follows in, Mbappe's already pressing on Stones and Vinny, for example, like this. Silva would then, almost from a blind spot, just make a little curved run into this space, and it was opening up because you could definitely tell that with the fact that City knew that they had a mismatch on the defenders with Haaland, these two really didn't want to be moved out of their position in that first half. They wanted to stay really compact. So what ended up happening was a lot of space for someone like Silva or De Bruyne, if he was spinning into here, to receive that space and bring the ball forward. But another thing that was happening as well is, like I say, if these two players are being sort of dragged into here, and one of these guys goes to press and it's not quite on, and they manage to find Stones into here, for example, he had a lot of space to carry that ball forwards himself, because again, these players were pinned and these players didn't really want to engage, because if one engaged, say Camavinga, and Stones could find that ball into De Bruyne, which he did on one or two occasions, Chelsea, it's because I'm a Chelsea fan in the background there. But no, it basically gave City the chance to attack almost 5v5. But again, if Ceballos isn't on sort of ready enough and Silva's already breaking off the back of him, almost in a 5v4 at times. So you could definitely tell Real Madrid did not want to lose that solidity in front of their defensive line with Ceballos and Camavinga. So I think that, firstly, worked really well. Now, whilst we've still got this in position with these two players, because again, the positioning of Akanji and Vardiol was so important for this game. I think what worked really well is the pattern that we were talking about with how to get Haaland away from this sort of box press, essentially, where he was sort of boxed in here. And what worked really well was De Bruyne sort of shifting into here at times, or again, it was Silva or Foden once he came on. And this happened for the goal from the other side for Grealish, but I'm going to show the example from this side when it was Foden, because Foden did it quite a few times, whereas Grealish only really had that one for the goal. But what would happen is KDB would come into here and he'd almost be in a position where he's asking the question of both of these players. He's keeping them both pinned inside because they're both watching him. Again, Haaland is now, he's like between the two centre backs, so he's asking that question. Ceballos, again, he's sort of between the two. You've got a lot of players that are being asked multiple questions at once. De Bruyne's positioning there, perfect. Then you've got Akanji who can drag Bellingham inside to then open up this lane for Foden to arrive in that space that we spoke about earlier, that little wide pocket, but actually from the wing. So again, Grealish was doing it out here. He was doing it from the wing and receiving in that pocket here. And then the ball that is actually on, because Mendy would then be pulled out here, the space is here. And because, like I say, with KDB, Haaland is in the blind spot here of Asensio, and De Bruyne has them both more or less pinned. So what was working really well was this ball over into this area here, with at the same time Haaland sort of spinning off and arriving at the same time. And that had a really good effect to sort of get Haaland into these areas here on a few occasions. And again, it happened for the goal. But Guardiola ended up getting the touch for the assist for Haaland. But it was the same thing with Grealish putting that little clip ball over the top in a similar fashion. I think, again, that's a pattern that they looked to create on purpose. And that's why the positioning of these two players being close to Haaland was important, so that Haaland wasn't the primary focus at that time of the ball being played. Because if KDB wasn't in there, then Asensio, he's got a lot more room and a lot more sort of time to sort of check his shoulder here, check here, and he's probably not going to let Hartman get that same space in behind him. So that's essentially what worked in terms for C. But what didn't work? Now, I think firstly, the subs, I think it just killed the game a little bit in terms of sort of how the team set up, because I think we had Stones and Diaz for Kovacic to come into here. So Ake went off. Grealish, we know, went off earlier with an injury. And then Lewis came on for, I think it was just Akanji at half time. So now the difference is again, the legs went a little bit in midfield. Kovacic being in here on his own, he's not got that same awareness that Stones had. And what you did get a bit more from Kovacic is he did have that license to drive that ball forward, like we spoke about, when that space sort of opened up, he could bring that ball forward. But there was just too many duels that they then lost, which then allowed direct chances for these four players, which again, is exactly what you want to minimise against Real Madrid. And this is where you get to the biggest problem that City have. And I've put it down to two things. I think one, the physical flooring is poor, and everybody said that. I've got videos on my channel saying about that before. And especially when you've taken off someone like Akanji, who did really well in that first half, and Stones being in here was giving him a little bit extra as well in terms of that physical flooring. Because Vardiol and Akanji are probably your best recovery defenders. So at least when those two players were looking to break off the back, you could at least stick with them. And you essentially had a +1, because literally, if I just take away all the arrows, instantly that's 4v5. So City were looking to have that little advantage. But as the legs were wary and mistakes start to be made, and I think that's where the second thing is. I think it's the mistakes. And I think the physical flooring is affecting the confidence of the team, because Guardiola is making changes to his system to try and cut out as many issues as possible right now, with the physical issues that they're having, the transition issues that they're having, trying to make changes to make things work, going a bit more direct at times, which again was the right decision in the games that he's used it. But I think a lot of that is taking away from the confidence in this City team at doing what they used to do on an automatic basis. They used to not have to think about what they were going to do. And I think now when you see the players on the ball, there's just that little bit of sort of indecisiveness that there wasn't in the past. And I think a lot of that stems from sort of, again, it's just a poor run of form, a poor run of results, and then not knowing that they don't have the same physical sort of defensive abilities that other teams have to bail them out. So if they do lose the ball in these areas in here, then more often than not, high XG shots are going to get off on their goal, because they don't have the quality of say the other sort of defensive teams, like an Arsenal, like a Liverpool, like who can bail them out with brilliant defensive actions, with a Van Dijk, with a Rice for Arsenal, with the fullbacks, Timber, um, and Gravenberch for Liverpool as well, had an amazing season at sort of cutting things out in this area too. And of course, when they had Rodri, that was a little bit better. But right now, it's just not there. And I think, like I say, I think the physical flooring and the confidence are both just through the floor. And Real Madrid would do what they always do, and they were inevitable. And this man, by the way, Jude Bellingham, clutch again, but not just clutch. He's just complete. And I think I said it on a TikTok. I think he might be the most complete footballer in the world right now in terms of complete ability, clutch goals, winning duels, back and forth, box to box, everything he can do, twinkle toes, considering his sort of his frame in and around these number 10 and these half space areas. Can play wide when he's needed to, can press as a second striker, can press as a left winger, can press in that sort of box to box 8 role. I think he's just so complete and yeah, just what a footballer. So let me know your thoughts from this game, from the tactical breakdown that we've done just there. Let me know the next video you would like to see on the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.